Hey everyone, it's Jonathan from Motorpsychology. If you're a new viewer, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, thank you for coming back. I really appreciate your continual support. So I'm down here by the mighty Mississippi River, which is at high volume, and there's a lot of water due to the snow melt that's going on. So in today's video, it's part 2 of replacing the rag joint and the steering coupler of the C3 Corvette. Part 2 will complete the video on this particular project, and I'm so glad that I'm going to be getting this thing done, because replacing the rag joint was something that was definitely required and something that I needed to do. To be honest, I was a little bit intimidated with the thought of doing it, but you know, if you take your time and you work through it, nothing working on these C3 Corvettes is impossible. So stick around, let's get into the video and see how it goes. So here we are in part 2 of this video. Once again, this is the old rag joint here. And this is the new one, plus the part that I redid, which is that part. So it looks good, it's going to be functional, and I can't wait to get that on. Just got to take out some of the painter's tape. There we go. Moving on to this monster here. So some people have suggested that maybe I go with a Borgage and steering box. I'm looking into that, but for now I'm going to keep this one, and let's just untape it and see how it looks. Looks pretty good there. That looks good. I got a couple other things to undo. Take the tape off this end here. And finally, down here, take that tape off. There we go. So there we go, the old and the new. This guy here, and I still have to work on the carriage bolts that go in here. There's 2 that are still on the frame of the Corvette that I need to get out, and that's it. So pretty happy with it. I'll probably tidy up this area a little bit with a Dremel, who knows. Nice, I like it. All right, getting ready to put the new rag joint onto the steering gear here. So as mentioned before, this has a flat side to it, and in here you can also see the flat side. So you just want to make sure that those are lined up properly and put them in. So it's about lining the flat side up here with the flat side on here, and then just sliding it on like so, and then tapping it in, which I'm not going to do right now until I get out where the car is. So what I like to do is to put the assembly lube on there, and that'll just help it slide in a bit better. Looking down on this, there's grooves that have been milled into this shaft, and that is where this hole is going to line up. So these are in there so that you're able to get the pinch bolts through. Okay, to get this started, I'm going to have to reinstall the steering gear. And before I do that, I am just going to slide this guy on a little bit further on the shaft. So I'm just going to use a little bit more of this stuff. Hopefully that'll work. Just kind of lubricate this area here. All right, this rag joint should go on a little bit better. Pretty easy. And can definitely tap it on a little bit further as well. Okay, I'm just going to tap this thing in. There we go. As you can see, I now have this on, ready to get installed. So here we are inside this museum piece here, and I'm going to just unlock the steering wheel so I can turn this steering here. So I'm going to turn the key here. That will loosen up the steering wheel so I can turn. So I'm going to go around to the front again and turn the steering wheel from the driver's side, and that way I'll be able to get the steering coupling up where I need it to be. So before putting the steering coupler on here, you want to make sure that you find that flat area here as far as the shaft, and then it's just a matter of popping that on. What I've done is pre-threaded this as much as possible because it's a very tricky and potentially difficult thing to get in. So I made sure that that's open wide enough. I've got this partially inserted. Now it's just a matter of popping it on this and getting it on. But you can see there's a little lip there that could be causing me a little bit of problems here. So I'm going to see if I can get it around that. I hope. Tap it in, and then we'll be off to the races. So now I can just slide this up into position and then go and put the steering box back in position. Okay, now we're in a position where I'm going to put the steering gear back on these bolts and stick them in. I wasn't able to get new bolts because they are very unique in length. They're 4.5 inches in length, and they also have a very fine threads. I think they were something like 3/8 24, which is hard to get. So they're in okay shape, so I'm just going to reuse those with the existing hardware, and that should create less problems. So I've cleaned this up a little bit. It looks a lot nicer than what it did before. This is not the final coat on there, but it is at least nice and clean. Squish it through here. There we go. You guys need to go down here. Almost. The slight change that you're going to see in this video is I took the steering gear off and I took the metal plate that is on the rag joint off, and it just makes it a little bit easier to line up and get into that steering coupler, which is located on the steering column. Another thing that is kind of difficult to appreciate when you're watching this video is that steering gear is a fairly big part and it weighs a lot. So when you're pushing it up into the frame and into that quite tight space where you have to use some precision to get the rag joint into the steering coupler is a little bit tricky and a little bit challenging, and also I found a little bit fatiguing as well. So if you do decide to do this yourself, just be aware of what you're getting into and the additional weight that the steering gear, including the pitman arm, is going to have as you align that up. But it's certainly possible. It just takes a little bit of time and persistence.
Let's call that good. Whoops, let's call that not good. Whew. That's a heavy sucker. All right.
Another thing that is really important is to keep that steering coupler that's up on the steering column loose. So don't tighten it. The idea is to keep all the components loose and able to either move on the steering gear shaft or on the steering column shaft until everything is in place and aligned. Then you can start tightening things up. I'm just in the process here of getting the carriage bolts through the frame and aligned so that they line up with the steering gear. Not very difficult, just a little bit of wiggling around, but totally easy to do.
Right, put the lock washers on again. A little bit of a tighten here. Tighten but not a torque.
The final torque for these 3 bolts for the steering gear are 30 foot-pounds, just for your reference. And they could go up to 32 foot-pounds if that makes that much of a difference.
So there we are, looking up the steering gear and then into the rag joint area. Now just to tighten up a few things and we are done. So we're down here, we just got to tighten a few things. This needs to go on here. Goes on like that. Goes on like that. The one at the bottom needs to go on as well. I'm just going to rotate this around here, get the other side. It just worked out for me that it was easier to do this from underneath the car opposed to reaching over the fenders and down into this area. Do this guy really lightly. So I use my impact wrench there on low torque and super light resistance. So that was just to help me get into that space and get that pinch bolt on. And that was a 12-point pinch bolt. That was the original pinch bolt that is connected to the steering column. Now I'm below just tightening the flange bolts. So there's two of those, and they kind of connect the metal thin flange that's on the rag joint, and both of those bolts need to be torqued into 12 foot-pounds, which is super light. I just rotated the entire steering assembly there 180 degrees so I could do the other flange bolt, and we'll just get that done, and this project looks like it's getting closer and closer to getting completed. So here's the steering coupler on. I haven't torqued the bolts yet. Looking at it, you've got the one pinch bolt here, which is the original one. That is super challenging to get on. You really have to make sure that you have these ears of the steering coupler aligned perfectly, or this is not going to go in. So I took quite a bit of time aligning that gap so that it was perfectly aligned so this would go in. Down at the bottom is the other pinch bolt, which came with the rag joint, and that needs to be torqued at 30. The other parts need to be torqued at about 12, which is fairly light, not really that significant. But you know, if I turn the steering gear here, you can see how the coupler works. And I'll just go up to the top and we'll turn the steering wheel and check that out. So inside there is the steering wheel. I'm going to turn the rag joint and you can see how that moves. There's the final product right there. So there the rag joint is down there. It's all together. All I have to do is torque it, which, as mentioned, the pinch bolts are 30 and these little guys in here are, I think they're 12 or so, which is super light. Not too concerned about that. But that pretty much wraps it up for this job and doesn't look too bad. Hey everyone, that concludes the video on the changing of the rag joint steering coupler on that C3 Corvette. Hopefully you found it useful. I'd rate it about a medium difficulty job. It takes quite a few hours and you really have to be careful not to mess things up or get in a situation that you can't recover from. So hopefully this video will help out anyone who's interested in doing it. And you know, if you have the right tools and you feel confident, I'd say go for it. It's all part of my working my way around this Corvette to get it refreshed and make sure that most of the parts are new or at least refurbished. So, you know, my goal is to add to the body of knowledge and skills that are out there and to help keep these awesome looking cars on the road for years to come. So thanks so much for watching this video. Hopefully you found it interesting and entertaining, and we will see you all in the next video, which is coming really soon. And I think I've got the transmission pan and filter one lined up. So stick around for that. I'll get that out as soon as possible. And thanks again so much for your support. Bye for now.